Well, folks, it looks like it's 9 o'clock on the dial. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. We're going to pitch it over to Matt for some ground rules, and then we will introduce this morning's presenter.
Thanks, Jeff. Good morning, everybody. Just a few quick things for this morning's webinar. We are recording this, so it will be available on our YouTube channel in a few days if you ever want to refer back to it. If you have any troubleshooting or technical issues, please put those issues into the chat feature and I will do my best to help you through those. Just be aware that most of the time it is due to your own Wi-Fi connection. If you have any questions, feel free to raise a hand, put those into the chat, or even unmute yourself and we will prompt Debbie as needed. If you can remain muted while you're not asking questions and while the doctor is presenting, that would be great, so there isn't any background noise. There's one button I'd like you all to avoid hitting. It says present now or share screen. Please do not hit that, as that will interrupt the presentation. And finally, if anyone has called in via telephone today, please send me an email at mfrey@pgahq.com. And that way we'll make sure you get your MSR credit for the day. With that, I'll send it back over to Jeff.
Thanks, Matt. So today's speaker comes to us through Becky Dengler, our Philadelphia section member who's at Ed Oliver Golf Club and also a member of our women's committee. Becky's also been a member of our instruction committee. So unfortunately, she couldn't join us, but thanks so much to Becky for introducing us to Dr. Cruz. So this morning's presenter, Dr. Debbie Cruz, is the founder and director of OptiBrain. Based on over 30 years of research, she has created systems designed to improve performance in a variety of arenas. Specific to the OptiBrain OptiTrain apps, she's collected a large portion of research data from golfers, archers, and shooters, as well as the special needs population, and has expanded her work to include basketball, baseball, education, and the military. Recognized by many as top in her field, she has received awards, including but not limited to LPGA Central Section Professional of the Year, Ellen Griffin Excellence in Teaching Award, and also recognized as a Golf Digest top teacher in Arizona, and is a sought-after speaker within the sports psychology community. Debbie is a wife, sister, mother, and grandmother who loves kids, animals research, and research-based technology. She feels truly blessed that her life's work has the opportunity to provide such positive impacts to educate children, improve athletic performance, and benefit adults in all walks of life. So give a warm Philadelphia section welcome to Dr. Debbie Cruz. Deb, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, thank you, Jeff and Matt and Becky. It was really an honor to be asked to share some of this information. I was just mentioning to Jeff and Matt that my area of expertise is really more attention rather than emotion. However, the two are constantly interacting, and so it's important for us to have an understanding of both. And the topic, emotional respect, probably came more out of a book that I wrote in 2013 with Candace Pert. She's a top 50 researcher in the world, just a brilliant lady, and she studied emotions. And so she attended a World Scientific Congress I put on and asked if I wanted to write this book. Well, I was very excited because in my thinking of golf, emotions kind of get a bad rap, and we're always attempting to fight them or control them or whatever, so they don't throw off our score and our outcomes. However, they're very, very important to have. And so we did write a book. It's called The Science of Golf and Life, and I learned a lot from her as well. So some of that will be presented today, and hopefully I always have two goals. One is that you have some things you can go away and do yourself or with your students to help them with managing emotions, and the other is that you perhaps have an opportunity to look at emotions a little bit different than maybe what you've done before, because they're certainly a very, very important part of our golf game and our performance. Okay, Matt. Matt's running the slideshow today. So if we define emotions, you'll find different definitions. I happen to like this one. It's instinctive or intuitive feeling as distinguished from reasoning or knowledge. So emotions are really what we feel. And you know that golf, having worked in it a long time probably, is very much a feel sport. And so it is important that we recognize our feelings. I think you also might know that feelings can be a little bit fickle sometimes, whereby they come to us, but our brain kind of gets in the way sometimes and redefines things for us. And so we'll talk about that as we go along, because certainly your focus of attention is important for recognizing the feelings you're getting, and then also for regulating the feelings that you're getting. Okay, Matt. So in the world of psychology, you can look at different primary emotions. The first actually deal with 5 primary emotions that have been defined: joy, fear, sadness, disgust, and anger. And it's a little disheartening that joy is the only positive one listed up there. However, if you go further, 7 primary emotions would include surprise and content, and then there actually are 27 different emotions that we could feel. Next slide. So what happens with emotions are chemical reactions in the brain. Not that you need to know and understand all of these, but I want to point out the importance of how quickly these change. There's more than 100,000 chemical reactions every second. So they're changing all the time. They send trillions of messages, or actually we receive trillions of messages today. So much coming in. Here's your brain chemistry responding to that. And then frequency, or the electrical activity, is the other side of it. So I kind of, for my own understanding, look at chemicals as the underneath response, the emotions, and frequencies are more, we always measure and talk about them at the cortical level. So at the higher levels of the brain. And there's the constant interaction of both. So we receive the information, the emotions, the feelings, and then our brain labels, manages, etc., what those tend to be. And our brain also will receive things, as we'll talk about, from the outside world, and then we deal with it internally. The ones that probably influence us, I'd say the most, we might add cortisol to this one, but norepinephrine is responsible for activation. Adrenaline is in the same category here, and that's its primary job. Dopamine is in the control of movement and emotional response. Definitely. And serotonin is the other one that's responsible for pleasure. Cortisol is stress response. I want you to be aware that the chemical reactions, they all have a half-life in our brain. So, how much time would it take to use up half of that release of, let's say, dopamine? And dopamine is probably one of the most important ones for us, and it has a 2-minute half-life. So that means it can change very quickly. Norepinephrine is 2 to 3 minute half-life. Serotonin can last, the release of serotonin, 5 to 6 days. And just for your interest, cortisol, the stress hormone, is it's 66 minutes. And there's one more chemical that can come in. It's called nitric oxide. It has a half-life of 6 to 5 hours. I'm sorry, 6.5 hours, but it can reverse any of these chemicals quickly. So the reason this is important is that if we get stressed and negative emotions are released on the golf course, I think sometimes we believe they stay with us for a very long time. The thing is, nitric oxide can reverse those very quickly. And the easy example is, you can miss that putt, and it can kind of take us down that black hole very quickly. But you go to the next tee and you hit this awesome drive, the best one of the day, and those chemicals can change immediately. It's almost like flipping a switch. So the only thing that makes us really probably go down that black hole and stay there a little while, that spiral we get into, is the fact that our focus of attention and our thoughts are doing that to us. They're kind of winding everything up and continuing. So the more we keep thinking about the shot that we just missed or that putt we just missed, that's what causes these to be released more and more, which is actually going to prolong their existence. But it doesn't have to be that way. The chemicals can be switched quite quickly in the brain if we change our thoughts and have our strategies set for doing that. Okay, next slide, please. So intensity of emotions is the other one that's important. So first is, what are the emotions that are prevalent at this point in time? And the emotions obviously come on a scale. I often use a scale like right here in front of myself, you know, say from your center to your heart, and we put it on a 1 to 10 point scale, and I just want to know from the players what level they're at. So low, medium, high, 1 to 10, whatever. Because as long as they can label it and understand it, they can change it. We change it typically by running the dial. Inside of us, we have an internal dial, and we have the ability to turn that dial up and down. And sometimes it's very important to turn up the dial or the intensity, and it's important for us to know how we do that. In fact, we did a study at ASU. We actually did it at 2 campuses, ASU and then Greensboro, North Carolina, and we were attempting to teach golfers to raise their heart rate quickly or their intensity quickly, and also to lower it. And I'm saying within 3 seconds. And they were all able to lower their intensity or their heart rate levels easily. They were not able to raise it in that short of a time, which was kind of interesting to us. You'd almost think it's be in reverse, but I think they spend more time practicing lower it. We actually had to end the study because we didn't get people in that were able to increase their heart rate that fast. But that is what happens in performance. We tested golfers with putting, and within a 6 second period of time, they're able to lower, within a 3 second period of time, they're able to raise or lower their heart rate 6 beats per minute. For older people, it's raising it that's important, and for younger individuals, it's lowering it that's important. But it's purely a function of attention. So what that means is if we put the right thoughts in there, that's what we're using once again to regulate our emotions and our intensity. The other important point is that emotions are your source of energy. And what we do in golf is we transfer our energy to the ball. And I think our players, it's important for them to be conscientious always of the energy they're choosing to transfer to the ball. And we do that, you know, our energy goes out through that club, the swinging motion to the club, to the ball, and then to the target. And sometimes I'll ask, especially the younger players, you know, is that the energy you choose to give to the ball? Because, you know, how well is that working for you? And it's probably not serving you right now. So you have a choice about these things, and we want to help them learn to regulate that emotion. Next slide, please. So where do the emotions come from? Of course, they come from inside, but it'll be events or people in the outside world that will often influence the emotions that we're feeling at that point in time. And can we change those? No, we can't change those. You know, we get in a cart playing with somebody that's not our first choice for the day, and so they tend to be a very negative person, and that's a hard situation for us. We're not going to change that person in 18 holes. So what's very important for us is to be able to manage our own emotions in terms of pulling in the person we want to hit every ball. And I'll talk about that as we go forward as well. But it will be more important for us to pay attention to our inside world. So we can use things from the past. If we're using emotions from the past, we're counting on our memory to give us those. If we're using emotions from the present, okay, and maybe those are the emotions that will serve us best to hit the next shot, they're coming from our source of feel, okay, and that's going to be the subconscious mind. And if we also have the option to draw from the future, anticipate success, let's say, anticipation of reward is extremely powerful for influencing our present state. And it's actually not the reward, it's the anticipation of the reward, something good happening, a good shot, a good score, a good finish. Any of those things can influence us in a positive way and set us up to be in the best place to hit the ball. Now, where would we bring, in order to walk up to the ball and then focus our attention appropriately to hit the shin over the ball? It's probably important that we deal with those before we hit the ball, whether they just pass through our brain and we let them go, or we start over on our routine, because it's about impossible to hit a ball, at least a good shot, with a question mark in your head or some of the negative emotions that can come. Next slide, please. Okay, so what I want to point out, use these emotions. I want to differentiate the ones that will serve us on the golf course compared to the one that will not serve us, of those 5 primary emotions. I'll take a player, of course, who's happy, joyful, positive, in a good place. That certainly is going to influence the performance to be more positive. But I'll also take somebody who has fear, anger, or disgust, because they all have activation with them. Okay, so even fear, we don't like it, it doesn't feel good, it can cause worry, but the activation in your system goes up, heart rate, blood pressure, etc. Same with anger, and same can be with disgust. As long as you have activation in the system, we can channel that or learn to use that to focus our attention appropriately to hit the next shot. You know, once again, it's like the putt you miss and you walk to the next tee, and you might still have a little anger in there, but you're going to just stripe that ball down the mower line when you hit that tee shot. Okay, but the only emotion that's very hard, I think, to work with, at least for myself, is sadness. So sadness, disappointment, I could throw frustration in there, although it's not typically one of the 5 primary emotions. The reason those don't work is because you have a decrease in energy in your system. And your emotions, once again, are your source of energy. And when your energy goes down, your emotions, such as these, cause your energy to go down. It's very difficult to focus your attention, period, over and out. In this case, if somebody gets to the place of frustration, which I think we do quite a bit of the time, or can on the golf course, it's not that you're going to stop that emotion from coming. It's that when it comes, you must first deal with the emotion, get yourself out of that black hole. I tell the kids especially to get your ladder out and climb out of that black hole as quick as you can. Take care of yourself first, and then ask yourself to go play golf. If you're going to wait for a good shot or change in your golf to help you feel better again, you're not in charge, and that's a problem. The emotion has now become in charge, and we're waiting for the golf ball to do something to change it. You don't want to give up that power and control. So you come out of the black hole, you can sing, you can think of things, you have resources from the past, the present, and the future to be able to help you change the emotion first. You can walk fast, you can walk slow. Both of those tend to work to change the emotion. Get yourself activated. The system loves to be in motion. And then you'll be in a better place to be able to think and hit the next shot. So ideally, we want to use the emotions on the left side of the screen there to help us hit the shot we choose. Next slide, please. So in terms of the effects of emotions on other areas of our performance that are important, obviously, feel is important because our emotions are feel. See, one here is, let's take confidence, for example. In your mind, you can think, is for you, is confidence more of a feel or a thought? And each of you might have your own opinion. I would guess the majority of you would think that confidence is a feel, which I believe it is. We feel confident today, or some days we get up and we don't. If we don't feel confident, it's very important to think confident. So when the feel is there, which is very helpful to us, that's great. If the feel isn't there, we must think confident. We say confident things to ourselves. And I'll give you a structure to do that in a minute or so. But we can, let's say, talk ourselves into feeling more confident. Confidence is a choice. So if we put the right thoughts in there, it will change how we feel. I've already mentioned intensity. We use that dial and to change the intensity, necessarily make them go away. Anger and anxiety, we want the activation associated with them for focus. We just don't want the negative component that goes with it, or the thought that often goes with it. So we would use our emotions here to influence our intensity. We've already talked about focus as well, because we can focus better when we have more activation in the system. The hardest one to deal with on the golf course or any performance is fatigue. So if we become mentally fatigued from all our negative emotions, it's going to be very hard for us to focus. But the one we don't think about often is decisions. And emotions have a huge impact on decision making. So when people have had a situation, it's back here in the back part of your brain where the emotion area has been damaged or removed from surgery. What's fascinating is they can't make decisions anymore. We count on our feel and our emotions to help guide us in decision making. And they tend to be more accurate than the thought component of making decisions, because we're very smart creatures and we can justify pretty much any decision that we want to make. But our feels guide us tremendously in decision making. So that's where we want to respect emotions for one, and feel that we have the ability to regulate our emotions, which I believe that we do. Next slide, please. So this is the framework that I use, and maybe some of you have seen it before or used it as well. It comes from psychology a long time ago. It's called the Iceberg Profile. The kids know it from the movie Titanic. But you know, what we see above the water is our consciousness, and it's the outer layer of our brain. What we see underneath the water is our subconscious mind. And you can see the relative size difference. Numbers are thrown out. I'm not sure I always buy into them, but we probably have 4,000 thoughts a day from our conscious mind, a very small part. Our conscious mind can only handle a very little bit at a time. Our subconscious mind is 40,000 thoughts a day or more. It knows what's going on. That's our feel portion of it. Our emotion more so is stored in our subconscious mind. It knows what's going on far before it can even get to the conscious mind and be processed. I use the analogy of a coach and a team. Your conscious mind is what you think, and it's your coach, and your subconscious mind is what you feel. It's your team. And I often use like the analogy of basketball. You know, the coach has very important jobs in basketball, preparing, strategizing, etc. But it's your team that runs the play, and the coach is not allowed on the court. And it's your team that runs the swing, and your coach simply prepares and gets ready. Your conscious mind can only handle about 5% of your brain power. Your subconscious mind, 95% or more. So it has every thought, every feel, every experience stored in it from your whole life. And so we want to make use of that. That's a very important source, the field source that of your emotions, to benefit our performance, not inhibit it. Okay, next slide, please. So the first thing in walking up to a shot probably that's going to influence those emotions is going to be a decision in terms of whether the shot is challenge versus threat. Okay, and we want to, if it's a threat, which it feels like a threat, you know, I'm in the woods and I don't have much of an out, and I'm leading the tournament and I would like to get this ball close to the hole. All of those things are in there. It could feel like a threat, but your consciousness is going to come in and make a decision to turn it into a challenge. And now you're above 50%. You have a much better chance of being successful with that performance. Being positive is not an emotion, it's a quality or more of a characteristic. And I brought it up here because I believe it's very important. I love positive, but it's hard to get there sometimes depending on what your experience has been on the course. And then the other idea is we can use a lot of our energy to manage our emotions and be positive. And that's not where we want our energy going in our emotions, our work, because our main focus of our energy is going to be to get the ball in the hole. And if we're spending too much of our 18-hole time managing emotions or trying to be positive, we're not spending it on getting the ball in the hole. So I like the idea of just noticing what is positive in front of us, because there always is, you know, whether it's the day or the weather or the trees or the flowers. If we notice what's positive, we don't have to spend our energy and our emotion creating it within us. Just notice it. And that can certainly help. So if we change everything to a challenge and we notice what's positive, receive it because it's already there, we can perform much better without spending all of our energy, because our energy and our emotion want to go to putting the ball in the hole. I will qualify that by saying that neutral is fine. We do a lot of testing with this with our players, and even coming from a neutral position. Well, what's that? On the golf course, neutral is counting your steps and just getting from here to there. What's in front of you? What's the next shot? And being more logical, analytical, and neutral is going to be positive actually for your performance. Probably not to the extent as being positive, but you'll be able to pull off the shot just fine. Okay, next slide, Matt.
Dr. Cruz, really quick, we had a question come in, if that's all right.
Yes.
Mr. John Dunnigan asked if there was any truth to the idea that allowing anger to persist for for about 90 seconds creates a chemical reaction that negatively influences performance that can last about 2 hours.
Okay, so it can. I would get. I don't have the stats and the research to quote for you on all of that. It can last for 2 hours. They give the chemical half-life a lot of these things, and I haven't heard, so to speak, as much the 90-second time frame, but it can. And I know, you know, Vision 54 suggests some of these things, and that's correct. But What I have learned through studying this is that the effect of nitric oxide, if you can release that chemical, which you can very quickly in your brain by using your thoughts, it will it'll clear out and wipe out the emotions, the emotional response and chemicals that are already existing. And that to me helps to explain why you can drop that putt and you have felt bad for the last 5 or 6 holes, whatever it is, you drop that one putt and it changes immediately. You're off and running again. And I kind of searched to find how that happens, because there is the data. You can look at it with animals, you can look at it with humans, that, you know, the chemicals we would consider negative and cortisol, etc., can have a long-lasting effect. But the first step would be to bring in thoughts that can counter that effect, rather than wait for that putt to drop and change our chemical reactions in our brain. Nitric oxide can do it. We can use our memories to do it. We can use it that sits on our bag, etc. Does that help, John? Yeah. And the other thing that you're saying, 90 seconds, you know, a minute and a half, that's a pretty short time, relatively speaking, to have a 2-hour effect. So I prefer to count on the fact that I put things into my brain that are going to change that emotion more quickly, so we can get the nitric oxide released and then counter the effect of the negative shot. Okay, next slide. Okay, I thought before we finish kind of talking and understanding our definition, we're always interested in the effect on performance. That's what this is all about. I kind of thought, what are the most challenging emotions that happen for us on the golf course, and whatever, and the flow or zone, whichever one you want to call it, I would probably consider the most pleasurable. And when we look at the brain in those situations, now we're looking at the conscious, mind you, but we also feel the balance of all your emotions is what's going to take you to that flow or zone state. And so we measure the emotions, mostly anxiety, fear, right here in the temporal cortex. And we see it when they balance out, or if anything, they are a little more right-sided. That's the state that we subjectively call the flow or the zone. And so we do want to stay definitely in a state of balance to hit the shots. The most detrimental probably is the yips. I've studied the yips with Mayo Clinic for the last 20 years. Anxiety is often, well, let me mention first, some of you may know, there's neurologic, one is psychological, and there can be kind of a mix of both. But neurologic yips, only being 7% of the yipping population, leaves 93% to be psychologically induced. Anxiety is not the cause of the yips. Anxiety is what I would call the middleman. So you have your golfer here and you have your target over here. And the golfer with their skill is perfectly capable of getting the ball to that target. However, anxiety exacerbates the condition. So when anxiety comes in, being the middleman, or fear comes in as the middleman, I don't know where this ball's going, I don't know what swing's coming out, it makes the yip bigger, and then it interferes with performance. Okay, so lowering the anxiety will certainly help. However, it's not the cause. If we give them beta blockers, it doesn't mean the yip goes away. So helping your players take the middleman out is very beneficial. People come in the lab and yip 75 putts in a row and make most of them. Because I yip does not mean I'm going to miss. So it is, once again, dealing with the emotions and the energy that's going to be extremely valuable for helping those people with the yips. Okay, next slide, please. Now I want to talk about practicing using the emotions to help us. How do you practice that? Because everybody will say, well, I can't get the experience of the tournament on the rage, and I can't create that level of emotion. The first piece is you don't need to create the same level of emotion. We've done studies in the lab. We can get people's heart rate to double, 130, 150. It's up there. It takes a lot of work for us to do that. But what happens even at lower levels is their same pattern of performance will come out. The same wing will come out as long as you can instigate some level of emotional response. So, I mean, I use trash talking a lot to help get some of the emotions out. And once you do that, you will see their pattern, which is what we want to be able to observe, and then we can help them work through the pattern. Now, then they'll be able to take that out to the golf course, and even though the intensity will be higher, they'll have strategies. The key strategies that we can use on the range is imagery or on the course. And if you make it the emotion be something, it's a 2-ton weight that I'm carrying behind me, this anger, this frustration. If it's a cloud, a black cloud that hangs over me, you've probably heard those before. Now you can do something with it. Drop the weight, stop carrying the weight. You might have to do it after every shot, but if you can, your brain, that's how your thought comes in and your focus of attention to help manage the emotions. The cloud that's following you around the golf course, get your blower out, for your leaves and blow it away. Whatever image makes sense to you, it'll work. It'll change the emotion, and for sure it'll change the intensity. We don't need it to go away completely because we learn to channel that emotion into our focus of attention and hit the next shot. Being in charge, and I say that, not control. In my world, it's not about controlling the emotion. It's about always seeing yourself as being in charge of it. So it could be a day when everything is off. The weather's off, the pairings are not good, I really don't care for this course that much, etc. There's a lot of things going on, some that we can control, some that we can't. I didn't wake up feeling so good today. But despite all of those things we're not able to control, the question is, could you still be in charge? And the answer is yes. And what are you going to be in charge of? Yourself. Okay, so the first step then is being in charge of your thoughts and your feelings. And we do that, one technique we use is called mini-me's. We published an article in Golf Digest, December issue, I think it was 2019. And we call it subpersonalities. In the research, it's called that. And you've probably seen this also with your players. There's 4 to 6 different people, sides of us, that tend to come out on the golf course. Okay, so they're all us. It's not that they're a different person. They're all sides. Just like you go to the golf course, you act one way. You go with your family, you show a different side of yourself. If you go to church, you act a different way. They're all real and they're all socially appropriate for the situation. Okay, so what I started doing about 4 years ago was having players identify the people that show up on the golf course. So we use a little card that looks just like this, and that line on the top is where you identify and give a name to all those different people that show up. My tour players, one of my tour players, hers is Sally. I have another one who's I'm sorry, I forget it right now, but it's a really good mini-me name. And then they'll all have their performer. They'll have their grit player. They'll have their scaredy cat, perhaps. They'll have their for me, their Eeyore. All of these players we identify. they can easily get 4 to 6. We have an average of 9 in our regular lifetime. And then the numbers underneath, 1, 2, 3, are the descriptors of how it feels. Because for each player, it's unique and different. One performer might feel focused, strategic, and confident. Another player, their performer, might feel in charge, strong, and let's see what we would say, in charge, strong, and maybe aggressive. For them, it's very important for them to feel aggressive. So they'll all use different descriptors. Once we get these out on a card, I have them go out to the range, and behind the ball, they bring up that mini-me, and they go up and hit one ball. And the ball will tell them how that mini-me responds for them on the golf course. And then they choose a different mini-me. And what they're doing two things. Number one, they're seeing how it affects the ball flight. Now, and it's surprising because some of the ones we think don't serve us do, and vice versa. But the other thing they're doing is practicing calling up a different mini-me, because on the course, you don't have to hit the ball with the one that showed up. If your frustrated person showed up after that last shot, you do not have to hit the ball with that person in charge, because they're not going to do very well. So once you practice calling up a different mini-me, it might be your grit player that needs to step up to the table and hit this next ball. It will change everything. Who you be will change the swing that comes out and the flight of the ball. So this is an easy strategy to practice using to change emotions. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I like to redefine or in my world, it would be correctly define the emotions. Anger is really just a very short madness. If we look at it that way, we don't create the spiral, and even less than 90 seconds, John. And we can make it be a very short madness, a burst of anger that we get out, and then whatever perhaps might be left over, we're going to use it because we lost our attention, and now we're going to use it to focus our attention. Anxiety is a short unknown. What causes anxiety is not knowing what's coming. The way we manage that is put in a known. In our system, it's called being factual. What do you know you can do here? And as soon as you grab onto a known, I can breathe, I can walk up, I can set the club, I can get myself ready. All your knowns, I can finish my swing. As soon as you have that in there, you're creating a state that's going to allow you to be successful hitting the shot. So put in your knowns. It also creates confidence. Frustration is just a very short disappointment. Short. And the most important thing, I believe, is move forward. What's right in front of you? The next step, start counting your steps, the next shot, what's going to be my best strategy to use on the next shot. Those things will fill your brain with something that's going to benefit you and serve you. So the negative, the frustration doesn't keep going, the anxiety, the anger, etc. If you fill this with what you want, you are not, number one, wasting your energy dealing with the emotion, because really what we want to spend our energy on is putting the ball in the hole. It'll help you move forward more quickly. And sadness is that one that doesn't serve us. Sadness, disappointment. And for that one, we'd like to park it and deal with it later when you get off the course. You can go back through all those shots that caused you to feel bad, feel sadness, disappointment, frustration. You'll deal with them afterwards. But immediately you're going to crawl out of that 6-foot hole and take care of yourself, and then go back and play golf. Next slide. Matt, are you there?
He may have lost his connection, Doc. I'll get to him real quick. Super quick before he gets to it, question for you. Is there Is there more benefit to an internal or external cue to change your emotion? So internal talk versus doing something audibly or physically?
Number one, I would say use whichever one serves you best. Use the one that's going to make the biggest, quickest change. I've had players who choose to look at the scoreboard to motivate themselves, to get themselves going. And I've had players that ignore the scoreboard for that reason. You use whatever is going to serve you best. If you use the whole goal with either one of them is to change the feel inside. So if you pull up one from inside, it has a history. And so it might be quicker and easier. It's like, you know, that birthday party when you were 5 years old, and it's all the emotions that stored it so you can remember every detail. You know, so if you pull up something from inside, it already has the emotions attached to it. And that can work against us as well as for us. That's why going outside sometimes might be most beneficial. Or talking to, you know, the player that you're playing with might serve you better to get out of the emotion you're in. And yes,
right,
whichever one serves you.
All right, let me give Matt a quick call. Like I said, he may have lost his internet connection in the office.
Okay, that's fine. Did you find it? Oh, come from a significant.
John Dunnigan just shot up a question. Do you find that yips come from a significant technical flaw that creates a recurring fat shot on a pitch, for instance, that creates the fear?
Okay, really good question, John. We've been studying what is the etiology of the yips. I mean, that's been a primary focus for us. What causes it? And I'm not sure, you know, the neurologist I work with, the motor learning control specialist, Christian Marquardt, who developed SAM that I work with, I'm not sure any of us would say still the cause. However, we're also very interested in what helps reduce the effect of the yips. So things that we have tested that might fall in the category of a technical change. First thing always is posture. If you change anything about the starting position, we would all say that's the first thing to do, because we just did a seminar on it. The reason is, as soon as your hands go on that club in a certain way, it pulls up its stimulus response. It pulls up a motor program that could potentially be a yip. Okay, if you change anything about starting position, the brain has to pay attention. Oh, something new and different's happening. Oh, it's different. And now you break the pattern potentially and have a chance. So starting position is critical. We found that, let's see, we lined them up correctly because a lot of people use that. And if I could tell you correctly, it reduced the yip, but it did not help performance. There's a difference between the two. It doesn't necessarily mean that reducing the yip changes performance, because you can yip the ball into the hole. We did eyes closed in one condition. It didn't have as big of an effect. We did looking at the hole. It did have a significant effect on reducing the yip. And I'm sorry, I can't tell you the performance result of that one. We haven't looked at that yet. We changed putters. It did not necessarily reduce the yip. It had some effect on performance. What else have we done? But I use a lot of different things. I have found, John, that sometimes I just have them open their stance. Just toe it out, even if it's still square. And it has nothing to do with the yip motion, and it'll change the hands, which makes not a lot of sense. The one I do know is not as effective is trying to fix the yip. You must focus their attention past the yip in time. So if the yip is happening at impact, you want them to be focused on something past impact. For the driver, it could be making that the fastest point of their swing. The finish is an excellent focus. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers exactly, but we use a lot of techniques to help the yip.
Doc, Matt's back. His computer locked up a little bit, so he may need to.
That's okay.
He might need to pull the presentation down and put it back up. So.
Okay.
It's just not showing.
I really just wanted to have time for questions. So if there's more questions, that'd be ideal.
Okay, great.
Doc, it's Robert. Do you hear me?
Yes.
I have a question. Do you see a transition when somebody has the yips when they're actually playing and not practicing? What how do you diagnose that, or what do you recommend to a player?
Okay, very good point. The yips can be conditional. It only happens when I'm in a tournament. It only happens on left to rights. It can be conditional. It can be intermittent. It comes and goes. And it can be both traditional, I mean, intermittent and conditional. So you're very correct there. In that situation, I would do most of the work on the course if you can, and I'll find any way I can to stress that. That's once again trash talking, or create a story. This is your first shot in the next tournament. Our first putt, it's a par putt, or a final putt to win the tournament. I'll create any story that attempts to increase the importance of that shot to see if I can get the yip motion out. The other thing I want to tell you is I always have them, whatever the putt, the chip, or the full swing, close their eyes and hit a ball after you watch them eyes open. And the reason is it'll either get worse because of the anxiety, it'll get better because they're not concerned so much with the outcome and what's going to happen. But if it reduces, it's not as prevalent, or it goes away, they don't have the yips that bad, because I'm attempting to figure out how bad the case is. So frequency is one you use, how often it happens. I have them close their eyes and watch to see if it lessens. And in the less situations it shows up in, the less intensity, the less they have. I want to say it. I'm sorry, the less impact the yip is going to have on performance.
One more came in, Deb. Do you ever suggest changing a pre-shot routine during a round based on change of emotion?
Oh, very good question. I want to say it in reverse. Change of emotion will change shot routine off. As soon as the anxiety comes in, any other?
I don't know if everybody was the same, but that answer was a bit choppy on for me, Deb. I don't know if that's I don't know if that was your intent or mine. I'm not sure if that was the same for everybody.
Same here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so the first part of it was that the emotion will change the routine. That's what I see most often. They add things. They add practice swings. They add looks at the hole, etc. And that's the wrong direction to go. It's more time for negative thinking, self-doubt, worry, etc. If anything, they want to go the other direction and reduce the time. Not to get fast. That's not the point. The point is just to be everything in your routine has meaning. It serves a purpose, and if it doesn't, it'll become a distraction. I also ask them to sometimes use the routine they have the most confident shot with. So if they're a very good driver and they're on the putting green and they are not feeling confident, or they have anxiety, use their driver routine. It already is trained in the system to pull up more positive emotion.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, it works.
Do you subscribe to the same, I guess, pattern as Vision 54, where there's a think box and a play box?
Yes. Yeah, I'll just separate them more so as left-sidedness is behind the ball. Over the ball is you're moving towards the right side of your brain, which will create balance, or a little right-sidedness, which will help you. So that means thinking is behind and feeling is over the shot, and all the way through the ball to the finish. So I'll include the swing in the routine more often because I want them to stay in there all the way through to the end. And then memory box, yes. We call it attributions. What they attribute is success and non-success to is important. And then,
Okay.
of course, between shot.
Question from Josh. Back to the mini-me portion. If you have a student that is jovial, happy by nature, laid back, do you have them explore the anger mini-me if it's generally against their nature?
If the anger mini-me is in there, yes. We want them, see, the thing is, if you can bring any mini-me up to consciousness, now you have a choice about which one you're going to use, rather than just being stuck with the one that showed up for this shot. Okay, so if anger is a part of their being, you know, we'll identify it. Now, people don't want to use the negative ones, but I want them to see the effect it has on their shot. Let's see, I had a guy, the first one I tested, and we looked at his brain patterns. He had a calm mini-me, and he thought that calm mini-me was going to be the best one to hit his shots. He also had a perfectionist, and then he had his focused one. His perfectionist in the brain and his focused one had the exact same brain patterns. He thinks the perfectionist is bad. I mean, this guy is the extreme. I gave him a scale. He scored the highest you can be on perfectionism. The next day he went out, he put his focused and his perfection guy together. He calls me at 9, he's 3 under. This is about a 10 handicap. It's the best he'd played in months. But see, he's thinking one is bad and one is good. So that's why we go through the exercise of seeing the effect it has on performance and then being able to change the mini-me. That's what they're practicing.
Excellent. Matt was able to get the next slide up for you, Deb.
Oh, that's great. I don't know if it's summary. We're getting close because it's, oh, I saw an arrow.
Looks like we're up to mental integrity was the next slide.
Oh yeah, mental integrity. I'm sorry. Okay, this one I'll just throw out there for you to think about because what's more in the media is mental toughness, and I understand mental toughness. I would say train that, so to speak. I prefer the term mental integrity, which I kind of made up. But for toughness, it invites the thought of having to be tough, fight the emotions, I'm not sure, spend a lot of time on what's going on inside. And I don't want players to have to do that because I want their time and attention and energy to go. Mental integrity, that implies whole, the definition is whole or complete, derived from qualities, honesty, consistency of character. They act according to their values, morals, etc. With integrity, we're using energy from emotion to fuel exactly what we want to have happen. Because I want the ball on the green. Okay, everybody's on board with that. Let's go. The goal is get the ball on the green. We have the skill and ability, and we have the belief, because it's honesty. We have the belief that we can do it. I think that's far more powerful, and it vibrates at a higher frequency, which is stronger than mental toughness. So you can adopt what you choose, but I prefer that term.
Doc, we have 2 more questions. We'll go Tom Smith and then Robert Kleckner.
Okay.
Hi, good morning, Dr. Cruz. Over the years, I've worked with visually impaired golfers quite a bit, and in the course of playing golf with them, they tended to show not a great amount of emotion in the course of their round. I'd appreciate your comments on the effect of visual and how it impacts on the emotions and all of the things we've been discussing. Thank you.
That's a really good point, Tom. And I think the fact that they don't watch what's happening with the ball, etc., probably can help minimize some of those emotions that we experience. I think that's probably correct. But I want to tell you, I had the opportunity to test the #2 blind golfer in the world, and I brought her into the lab, and she was absolutely fascinating. Her putts to green, putts to greens was 1.57. She was better than Tiger Woods at the time or any tour player. She explained to me what she did. You're asking about visual input. This lady was 60-some years old, never played golf till she lost her vision. She claims golf saved her. I looked in her brain, and her brain is extremely balanced and quiet. So that can also explain not a lot of it's less emotion, let's just say that time. The only active area of her brain was the occipital area in the back, which is your visual cortex. It was bright red. It had tons of emotion. I'm thinking, this lady's blind. Why is her visual cortex so active? She told me that she sees a line, a white line. It's 12 inches long. It's about the width of the ball, and the ball's in the middle of the line. She said when she doesn't see the line, she has a hard time performing the putt. And so she putts. She had tremendous skill, 3 foot, 6 foot, goes back to my 12-footers and sinks a ton of them. The smoothness of her stroke, I had a measure of her motion, was unbelievable. It was so smooth. But the point is, in her mind, she was making the line. That's why her visual cortex was so active. And so she made the line and just stroked the ball on the line. Her whole focus really was external, and that's what worked for it. And so I think, why can't we do that? If the line doesn't come to you one day and you can't see that ball flying the way you'd like, you draw it, you paint it, you make it up, and now you're programming exactly what you want. And I think that's what they do, because it's not given to them from the outside world. I don't know if that helps, but they were amazing.
Thank you.
Kleck, you had your hand up. You still have a question, buddy?
Yes, Doc, this is awesome stuff. First of all, thank you for doing this seminar. But I have a question on the development of any athlete, and I had a chance to read your resume. You do some wonderful things out there. In the mini-me process, is there a time where you reevaluate your mini-me's as you come up, as your age, as you develop,
Yes.
maybe as you get older? As you progress. So I just kind of maybe touch on that. And you do it one. I know you can't really put a time frame, whether it's once a year, once a month, every 2 years, but we all develop, and our players and athletes develop at different rates depending on their age. So maybe just touch on that.
I'm so glad you brought it up, because it's an important point. That the mini-me's you have today may not be the ones you have exactly tomorrow and the next day. I've had the tour players, they're so fun. They call back after the tournament. I found a new mini-me today, and she worked for the rest of the tournament. And so they're discovering new ones out there all the time. And that's important to add to your group. You know, and the mini-me's in our life are often defined by a role. You know, a father, a husband, a businessman, whatever. They're defined by our roles. But then there's the other ones that we have that are, you know, our emotional responses. And so, yes, I would at least once a month, I would kind of just check in. I do it to my mini-me's, because our experiences that we're having are going to influence them. And the ones that were predominant a month ago may not be, may not have a high frequency. They may not appear very much anymore, and they may have been replaced. So that's a very good question.
Thank you.
And so my summary is here. We've talked about all of these things, but if you have any further questions, that's probably my favorite use of time.
Anyone else have any questions for Doc? You did get a flurry there for a while.
Thanks, Patricia.
And John again must have stepped away because he's the question king. So maybe
To get your brain tested. Well, we have a system. OptiBrain is the tool that we use. We have OptiBrain that measures and OptiTrain that trains. And so the brain, we can measure 4 areas. Very important. The attention is in the front here. It's your executive function, focus of attention, and your emotions are here on the side. The temporal area, mostly anxiety, but it's going to give us a measure of emotion. We'll measure where you're at. We measure when you have good putts or so, not good putts. You can use it on full swing. You can take the OptiBand out on the golf course and use it. And then we make maps from it. We give you all the numbers and we'll interpret the maps for you. So that's OptiBrain. You can do it yourself. And it's myoptibrain.com. And then the training portion, we train you to bring yourself in balance, both thoughts and emotions, because that's what we'd like to see. And our research over those 30 years showed that that's the last second before you move, you want to be in complete balance. And that's what produces the best performance. It doesn't matter if your activity is very high, off the charts, your legs are shaking, your heart's pounding. If you can balance it, you can hit the shot fine.
Eric Hanley, real quick, do you use much of this stuff at the Golf Training and Research Center?
Yes.
In your work with students?
All the time with the players. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I'd say we use a lot of these techniques and these training principles with our students in player development. Yeah. But I'm certainly picking up some good new tidbits here that we'll definitely look more into.
So Doc Eric is the head of the Golf Training and Research Center up at Penn State University.
Oh, nice. Oh, I went there long ago and did a talk. Dick, let's see, was in charge. He was the department chair. But yeah, you have a very good program there. We've stolen a couple of your professors.
Yeah.
At Arizona State.
They do get out there, yep.
Yeah. Do you know Phil Martin?
I do. He was a department head
Yes.
here just before he left there, and when we were setting up our center, he was helpful with that.
Yeah, very good friend.
Yeah. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for the great questions.
Hey, Patty Post, do you do a lot of this with your college players?
Yep, tons. I've been saying sad golfers are the death of me for years. So as long as we can keep them away from that, we can deal with the others.
You're exactly right.
But again, I love the mini-me's because we're always looking for different ways to approach it with different teams. So yeah, definitely use that this year for sure.
Great.
Wow. Excellent. Anyone else? Any questions for Dr. Cruz?
Well, thank you all for giving your time and attention. I appreciate it. Happy to interact at any time.
Debbie, thanks so much for the time. We certainly appreciate it. I hope it's not too sunny out in Phoenix. So, make sure you wear enough
Probably
sunscreen.
can see it coming in. Yeah. I keep moving my screen.
Thanks so much. I'm sure we'll be back in touch soon.
Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, Doctor. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.